morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to have such a packed auditorium hall on a Saturday morning. Thank you all so much for coming and being with us today. Today, I am here not to speak as an expert, a doctor, or a professional, as I'm often asked to do. I'm here to share my story of an aspect which I think some of you know. I believe I have ADHD. I've thought that for the last 20 to 30 years. It dawned on me when I started seeing kids with similar conditions. And when I mention this to people who come to visit me, sometimes in my defense, or sometimes when, or sometimes to give hope to a family in despair, they look quizzically, you know. My family, of course, knows it, and so do my colleagues and friends here in Children First. Not because I have gaslighted them to believe that, but because they've lived with me, they've worked with me, so they know. So let me start with this thing that happened about 4 weeks ago. My wife, Shailaja, and I had gone to Mumbai for a conference. Shailaja got invited to speak over there, and I tagged along, which I often do. But in Mumbai, we have very close friends, and these friends are equally passionate about getting together, having fun, cooking, and obviously we were not going to let go of that opportunity, so we prepared for that more than the conference. At least I did. I wanted to cook. I do love cooking, and I said, I'm going to also make this, new meat dish that I have discovered, And so I shopped meticulously, went to INA market, went to the Korean shop, made little packages of ingredients, etc., made it into a little, nice little, box, a bag, and we set off, and of course, we checked into our hotel the next evening after the conference, which of course went very well. We started in our Uber, and it was raining torrentially in Mumbai that night, and I'm sure a lot of you have encountered that, and the traffic was thick, but we were so excited to meet our friends after many years. And we are singing along and going halfway down, 45 minutes. Suddenly I remember the package in the fridge. And I start swearing and cursing myself. Story of my life. I can't remember. I mean, it's countless times that I have actually done things like this. I have lost my mobile phone numerous occasions, every 2 weeks when it first came out. I've now kind of, it's like an appendage, so I don't lose it just as often. I have, forgotten about appointments, given double appointments, missed flights and trains because I had misread the information and the timing, miscalculated the time it takes to be on the road, and so on and so forth, right? However, as a baby, I was not like that. Here I'm at 5 months old, and that's with my mother. Can you see the connect in this picture, right? I mean, this is a delight for any person studying psychoanalysis and doing infant observation, and indeed, as I grew up further, I was here. I'm 1.5. Look at this picture. Look at the joy in the family, right? Look at my dad too, right? How proud he is and glowing almost, isn't it? I mean, is a picture good enough for it? Okay. But once I became 20, this is when I was 20, things changed. Can you see my expression in that picture? Well, it's on stage, but I didn't have to act too much to get that expression on. That's how I was feeling almost all the time inside. Yeah, I was angry, I was frustrated about so many different things in life. So how did that change come about? How did that change occur? What happened? Well, school happened, but even before school, there were, that's me, upside down, yeah? So even before school, I was considered a naughty boy, a naughty boy, right? And I don't know if any of you are from the generation when Bata used to make this shoe, they used to look like little tanks called Naughty Boy. And they were supposed to be shoes which would never wear out, and you had to just grow out of them and get into your next Naughty Boy, right? But for me, they didn't last for more than 2 months because, anything in my sight under the waist was something to kick, right? I mean, and of course, not people, unless they came in the way. Yeah, that's how I used to be. And there were these stories that my mother would tell. I mean, I remembered some of them when I was 3, 4, but my mother would tell, with some degree of amusement. Both my parents did. It took pride in talking about how they had to tie me to the bedpost and how, if by any chance the door of the house was open and there were 2 flights of stairs, instead of walking down, which for a toddler takes time, I would roll down, to get away. So I would roll down 1 flight of steps and the other flight of steps, and I would start running, and my mother, with her pallu and everything, was charging down the steps again to grab me and so on. So there were many such stories. And indeed, I was living on the edge by the time I was 4 or 5, with this intense curiosity and no sense of danger or consequences. I started taking risks and indeed had certain misadventures very early in life, some things that have stayed with me for decades after that. So elementary school was elementary. It was easy. It went mostly in playing and jumping around. But by grade 2, I remember distinctly, I started becoming very aware that there were expectations, and I was not meeting them. I was not being able to complete my classwork, my homework, and increasingly, there was this sense of inadequacy and guilt that started seeping in. And in class 6, I was moved to a much bigger school, one of the most reputed schools in Delhi. And on the very first few days, one of my friends from the colony, he pointed out to kids in grade 6, mind you, who were orators and debaters and writers and actors, and I felt so small and inadequate again. By middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th, I had started stammering. And I used to dread the teacher asking me questions because the other kids would make fun of me because of my stammering, my complexion, because I could not complete my classwork and all of that, right? And so I was a very quiet little mouse in the classroom. But at home, I was very different, right? I was resentful. I was bullying my brother and sister. And with my mother, I was so defiant, rude, and provocative. I would, kind of provoke her in many ways to get a reaction. And that's how it carried on till I probably became an adult, or till my mid-20s, perhaps. And, of course, by grade 8 or grade 9, outside school, I was getting into bad company, kids from the fringes, and had more misadventures, which I can't talk about here. And the parents of good kids, they were telling them not to mingle with me. And I could see from their body language, their posture, how they would completely ignore me if I was in a group of kids. By high school, I was failing subjects, and I was really scraping through classes, yeah? I mean, anything other than studies, football, music, theater, food, travel, attracted me like how. I was fascinated by them, but not with studies, right? The work kept piling up, and the procrastination reached another level altogether, yeah? And there was such self-deprecation, and I was so unforgiving towards myself. And the remorse and the guilt, they were constant companions. It didn't show on my face, though, yeah? I was a good actor. I mean, I did get on stage every now and then. And there was this, by the time I was in high school, this intense anxiety that I started feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was so bad that I had to leave spaces. I remember going into libraries, and in my home, most people were avid readers. Reading was a huge thing. Storytelling was a huge thing, And both my parents, the moment they would get any time, they would just sit with a book. And my grandparents would sit with books, right? And I wanted to do it, but I couldn't. I would go into the library, issue about 4 or 5 books at a time, and they would sit on my desk. I would want to read them. I would probably read 10, 15 pages, and then return every one of them in 4 to 5 weeks. And then I started getting these cramps in libraries, I remember. And so I stopped going because the loos in the school were never very clean. So, yeah, okay. And so with my mother, I had a love and hate relationship, and you can understand. she had a tough time managing me over the years for different reasons. And I think that I mean, she also, like me, and I think I inherited some of that, is an intense person, volatile, and sometimes she would become quite harsh when the chips were down. I do believe that she went through her own depression and anxiety through those years. But the relationship with my father, on the other hand, was very different, right? And this is, of course, a picture from about 10, 12 years old back. He's much older, and and I hope that I still have that connect. He has dementia, advanced dementia, and I can get a flicker of response right now. But right from the beginning, from the time we were young, he was there, right? And I remember that when there were times when we would gather, as a community. We did not have mobile phones for social networking. So the networking used to happen in a park in the neighborhood, and families would come there. And by and large, it was a wonderful occasion where the parents would sit together and the kids were running around, and I used to love it. Only barring one time, and that was the time when the school year would get over. Come April, I would start shivering in my pants because the parents would get together and everybody else's child would top. Everybody would come first. Even when two kids in the same class, both would come first. My father would point out to me, But we were last. In fact, my two brother and sister also were not very good in academics at all. And my mother had to, sort of bear this huge burden of not being able to do, the best for their kids, right? And I remember those walks back from the park after the results were out, and there was absolute silence, and we were weighed under by this heaviness. And my mother would be muttering under her breath, and what did I do to deserve children like this, and stuff like that, right? And suddenly I remember once my father said, but somebody has to bring up the rear, and we would all started giggling. So there was, despite everything, there was this lightness that he would bring, yeah? So what was, persistent in our household, despite the difficulties, was an atmosphere of joy, of enjoying life, those moments that you were talking about. So, of course, then life went on, and I went to college. College was a revelation because, it was a place where eccentricity and doing things out of the box was the thing. It was right on top. I mean, much beyond academics. And so I had a fantastic time, made some of my best friends in life. And after that, of course, during my post-graduation years, I realized that, oh my God, there are kids who are just like me, and those stories that I've been hearing is like almost, a mirror image of what I've been through, right? And over there, of course, I met this woman. I was 28. And this woman, Shailaja, she got me completely, in every sense of the word. Besides going head over heel, which is what I did, and which is not often adequate to hold a relationship together, I believe that it is Shailaja's deep commitment and faith that helped me heal over the years. She truly embodies her books, as some of you who have read the books, you would know. And together we have chosen often the unbeaten path, and that has resonated so well with my penchant for adventures and for risk-taking. And of course, then came our children, not just through risk-taking. I mean, these are the only things we really planned well, I think, in life. And our parenting with courage, and sometimes with not so much of courage, right? And despite all our expertise, we could not help our son inherit some of the family traits, especially from his father's side. And he was diagnosed formally with ADHD at the young age of 7. I think the one thing that has helped both Shailaja and I grow up and heal in the process has been bringing up our children. And one thing I crave most today is to spend time with them. And sometimes they oblige. I have had a lot of good fortune, And one of the good fortunes was meeting Kavita about 13 years ago. This picture is not from, this picture. This picture is not from 13 years ago. It's more recent. It took us a little time to become this intimate. So, and what we could build together, the opportunities we got and the chances we took to create this wonderful other family, Children First. And the love and acceptance that I've got from these people who you've seen in various colors from the morning today has been beyond my wildest dreams. They have scaffolded me, they have looked out for me, they have managed my time. They, when we discuss about meetings, about appointments, they're the first ones to go and quickly tell the desks, the front desks, the managers that this is what needs to be done, because they'll know I'll forget. They'll know I'll double book, right? And I honestly feel nurtured, yet again. And I don't know how things would have turned out without this wonderful team of ours for me. And lastly, perhaps most importantly, I think I continue to learn from those sparkling minds that I see in my clinic day after day. And like they say, that if you have seen one child with ADHD, you have seen one child with ADHD. So the element of curiosity, of discovering stories together, that comes alive every time I meet a parent. Of course, there are challenges and there are difficulties in the family, which is why they've come to see me in the first place. But there's so much more. And I keep learning, and I keep marveling at these stories and these kids and the families. If I could suggest to all parents, teachers, sibling professionals, therapists, and doctors, I would say that if you know or happen to come across a child with ADHD, hang in there and keep the faith, like so many people did for me. For beyond the shallow waters, there's a lot of depth and adventure and possibilities. Thank you.